Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Safety and Health magazine webcast today, sponsored by Dry Fire. We are going to let our audience settle in for just a minute and we will start the presentation shortly. Thank you. Once again, thanks everyone for joining us for today's Safety and Health webcast, sponsored by Dry Fire. We are going to let our audience settle in for just a tiny bit longer and we'll start the presentation shortly. Thanks. Well, a formal hello and welcome everyone to today's Safety and Health magazine webcast, Bright Ideas in Safety, Leveraging Hi-Vis Flame-Resistant Apparel to Prevent Workplace Incidents, sponsored by Dry Fire. My name is Barry Botino. I'm an associate editor at Safety and Health and a co-host of our On the Safe Side podcast. I'll be the moderator for today's event. Before we get started, I need to share a few housekeeping items with you all. First, the views of today's speakers and organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the council or the magazine endorses those items. After today's event, we'll conduct a Q&A session with our speakers. If you have a question at any time during today's presentation, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and tap the send button. After the presentation, you'll also be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey, but I'll tell you more about that a little later. Finally, this webcast will be archived. If you want to view this presentation or any of our past webcasts, please go to safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. You may also receive a link in our post-event email. Now let's introduce our speakers. Joining us today are Mike Clifford and Melissa Dixon. Mike leads product development and brand strategy for Dryfire's FRAR product line, leveraging his years of experience in protective apparel. Mike has a hands-on approach to collaborating with end users, which ensures that Dryfire's innovations provide unmatched comfort and protection in high-risk environments. Melissa is the Senior Director of Product at Inespro and National Safety Apparel. With 15 years of apparel design and product development expertise at NSA, Melissa has shaped some of the industry's most innovative safety solutions. She currently leads the Inespro Arc Flash PPE and NSA High Heat lines. With that, we welcome Mike, and Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Barry. And good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited to discuss such an important topic here. I'm going to kick us off by just going through the high-level agenda here, and then I'll pass it over to Melissa to get started. So we're first going to cover what we're calling the topic of the visibility factor. So that's all things high-vis, really starting from the high level. What is high-vis and why it's critical and important? And then we'll go through choosing the right FR gear and then looking to the future as far as trends and future innovations in high vis. Melissa, I'll pass it to you now.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Now, for those of you that don't know, Mike and I are in our Cleveland, Ohio office. And in Cleveland, we like to say that we have about two seasons, winter and construction season. So this topic is very near and dear to our heart and very timely for the beginning of spring. So first, I'm going to go over the basics of why it's important for workers to wear high visibility apparel in high risk environments. So it's important because the Department of Transportation recognizes that struck by incidents are extremely hazardous for those workers that are working on and near a roadway. This is what we call a struck by statistic. Now, it's important to know that not all struck by statistics, when you're looking this up, say from the CDC or the Bureau of Labor, they don't all involve being struck by a vehicle. This can include anything from a tool or a piece of equipment on a job site falling on you. Now, when we do talk about those incidents that involve a vehicle striking a person, the CDC tells us that about 20% of those non-fatal incidents do involve a vehicle, and that comes out to be about 2,800 struck by incidents that do not involve a fatality. Now, in those environments, such as a construction site, about 47% of all construction fatalities do involve being struck by a vehicle. So this is why it's extremely important for those workers to be seen in that hazardous environment. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics also tells us that 310 worker fatalities involving a motorized vehicle strike happened in 2023. So this is extremely important to help protect our workers, and we're going to talk about that today. So the National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety recognizes that this is a serious problem. So what can we do to help protect our workers? Well, their recommendation is to follow the manual on uniform traffic control devices. This outlines recommendations for safely working near a roadway and talks about high visibility recommendations. And we'll be talking about that throughout the presentation. So the number one thing to remember is that workers in high-risk environments are focusing on their job. They need to do the task at hand and may not be necessarily aware or heightened to their surroundings. This is why it's important for them to be seen by those people working in that surrounding. So that could be oncoming traffic or their fellow workers that are operating equipment within their vicinity. Now, this is where high visibility safety apparel, also referenced as HVSA, this is where this comes into play. We want to increase that worker's visibility to the surrounding people. This is called conspicuity. So conspicuity is a term that is referenced in the High Visibility Safety Apparel Standard, which is ANSI ISEA 107. So we'll talk more about the requirements and all of that, but it's important to understand this definition. So conspicuity is the quality of being noticeable or easily seen. This is the goal of high visibility safety apparel. So when it comes to recommendations, the Federal Highway Administration recognizes that high visibility is one of the most important needs for these workers that are performing tasks near moving vehicles and equipment. So this is going to include anybody that's working in an environment where they have the potential to be struck by a moving vehicle. This includes working in proximity to traffic on a roadway, work vehicles, say on a construction site, or even equipment in, say, a warehouse. Now, this is enforced by the OSHA General Duty Clause. Employers are responsible for identifying all hazards and protecting their workers against those hazards. Now, in order to help comply and protect workers, they should be following ANSI ISEA 107. And for those workers that are around moving equipment and vehicles, Class 2 and Class 3 compliance is going to be the recommendation. And we'll talk about the difference in a little bit between what those requirements are and recommendations for different settings to use Class 2 and different settings to use Class 3. It's important to note again that high visibility apparel is to help workers be seen while their attention is being diverted to the task at hand. So what are some of those industries where these struck by incidents are occurring the most? So according to the CDC, Workers that have a greatest risk for being struck by a vehicle are those in the utility industry, those working in warehouses. So think, tow motors or forklifts going on around them. And then also road construction, that's pretty, relevant for the task at hand as we get into spring. So utility workers do have a unique challenge of not only having the risks associated with working near a roadway, but they also need to wear flame-resistant clothing. So this is where we'll get into the second half of the presentation. Mike will talk about how do you balance that compliance with your arc rating or flame-resistant requirements while still allowing that worker on the roadway to be easily seen. So when we talk about visibility, it's important to understand the limitations of human sight. This is going to give you a greater understanding of how to be more visible, especially when we talk about hazardous conditions like a roadway at night. Now, according to the National Safety Council, as we age, seeing at night does get increasingly difficult. This means that a 50-year-old driver may need twice as much light to see as a 30-year-old driver. Now, I'm sure we've all been told that if you're going to go walking or jogging at night, that it's important to wear white or bright colors. You definitely don't want to wear anything dark because it makes it really difficult for people to see. It's important to know, though, that the average person can't really see that well at night, even something that's light colored. So you'll see in the illustration here that even someone wearing a white t-shirt can only be seen by a person driving at night from about 250 to 300 feet away. This becomes problematic when that person is driving at even moderate speeds. The average stopping distance for a driver to be able to recognize somebody and then react is going to be 525 feet at a moderate speed of 30 miles per hour. This means that it's more likely for that person to be struck by the vehicle before the driver has enough time to react and stop when they see them. In order to reduce your risk of being struck by a vehicle, you need to be able to increase your ability to be seen at a greater distance. So we'll talk about that in the next slide. How do we increase our visibility and allow people around us to much more easily see us? Well, this is achieved through a combination of two things. And all of this is outlined in ANSI ISEA 107. So the first thing that's important is having a fluorescent material. The fluorescent material that's used in the body of a high visibility garment is intended to increase that person's visibility. You want to be more conspicuous to your surroundings. So this is done not only with high contrast, so you want to be very highly contrasting that background, but it also helps to have the fluorescent material because fluorescent materials can reflect back more light than traditional colors. This helps to increase visibility in fair lighting conditions. This includes daylight, dusk, and dawn. Now, the key to remember is that there does need to be surrounding light for fluorescence to improve the visibility of the wearer. This is why it's required to also have retroreflective material when having a high visibility garment. Retroreflective material, or just reflective material as it's most often known as, is used to increase visibility in lower light settings. So think nighttime, dusk, and dawn. This material, as you can see here in this reflective tape, uses a combination of glass and metallicized beads to reflect back light. So these beads reflect back a higher proportion of light from the light source, such as headlights. So as a headlight shines onto this reflective material, that light is then sent back to that headlight or the person driving the car with the headlights. This allows them to easily see that person in a nighttime setting. Again, it's important to note that a combination of the fluorescence and the reflectivity is what helps to create an optimal visibility environment for that worker. It's also important to note that light is a factor. You do have to have some sort of light for that reflectivity to work, and you do have to have some ambient light for that fluorescence to be seen. Now we'll get into some more specifics on how to help increase worker visibility by using those fluorescent and reflective materials to create a safety garment. The best way to increase worker visibility is to strategically place those materials so that you're accentuating the human form. And this is a recommendation for ANSI ISCA 107. It's also important to have 360-degree visibility to ensure that you can be seen from any angle. When you combine this and you are putting that reflectivity on areas like the ends of the limbs, whether it's your arms or your legs and around the torso, this is really helping to outline that this is the form of a human. And this activates a natural instinct that we have that allows us to be able to detect that emotion is a living organism versus a piece of equipment. So by outlining that this is a person, they have arms, they have legs, and this person is moving, that helps someone to recognize that this is a human, not a construction barrel, let's say. Now, as we go on to the next slide, we'll see a demonstration of all of these principles that we talked about in a video of some joggers on a roadway at night. So first, you'll start to see that reflective trim on those joggers appear around 1,000 feet away. Now, if you're in a car, this is going to give you ample time to react and stop that vehicle if necessary. As you continue to watch, remember that that driver, if they are driving around 30 miles per hour, is going to take about 500 feet to react before being able to stop their vehicle. As you see that group of joggers come towards you, you'll notice that there are some joggers that are only wearing white t-shirts. You can't actually really start to see that those are humans in a human form moving towards you until almost about 100 feet away from you. That just goes to show that light colors and even fluorescent colors do not provide enough visibility on their own at night to help reduce the risk of vehicle strikes. Reflective material is key for nighttime visibility, which is why it's important to employ those biomotion techniques, the 360-degree visibility, and the combination of fluorescence and reflectivity to optimize worker visibility. So next up, I'll be turning it over to Mike Clifford to discuss tips for choosing the right FR gear and the special considerations that are needed for ensuring worker visibility.
Thank you, Melissa. A lot of great information there, and I'm excited to kind of go through how you choose the right FR gear. You know, Melissa went through all of the information of why it's critical for Hi-Vis, some of the technology behind it. Now I'm going to go through how you actually take that for application into choosing the right FR gear. All right, so I'm going to start by going through some considerations for all safety managers when they're considering picking their FR gear and what FR gear is right for their employees. So As you guys know, many people in this workforce, safety managers included, constantly juggling different priorities. But when it does come to the FR Hi-Vis gear that you're selecting, the stakes are really high. So it's not all about checking a compliance box. It's about really understanding the real world, the risk your teams face, and then choosing that gear that truly protects them. So I'm going to go into the hazard assessment and compliance needs, what you look for in fabric performance and protection levels, the comfort and mobility of your garments, the features within task-specific FR gear, and then the maintenance and cost. All right, so as I mentioned in the previous slide, choosing your FR apparel really starts with a hazard assessment. So the first step in that assessment is really to identify the hazards. So you want to identify those hazards and just document any or all potential sources of thermal exposure in the workplace. After you've done that, then you want to evaluate the likelihood of each hazard occurring based on the job task. Once you've identified that, next you'll look at assessing the severity. So you want to ask yourself, what's the potential injury if that hazard becomes reality? And then finally, implement appropriate migration. Migration would be selecting the proper FR clothing that reduces the risk to an acceptable level. And remember, when you're going through the hazard assessment, it doesn't just stop here. It's not a one and done process. Your assessment should be documented and reviewed regularly, especially when job tasks or equipment change. Now, we'll go into the next consideration, the fabric performance and protection. So remember, when you're prioritizing your gear, your FR apparel, always make sure that you're using verified ARC ratings and flash fire certifications like NFPA 2112. You can't just check the label. You really need to understand the different fabrics and how they behave, how quickly they self-extinguish, how they resist heat, and etc. Another factor to consider with fabric performance is durability. Durability matters to make sure the protection lasts through repeated laundering. You want your garments to last as long as possible, and you don't want to lose the safety aspects and features of that product. Next, we'll look at a powerful example of why all these decisions, when you're considering fabric and your garments, really matters. So we have a video here. Before I get started, I'll kind of tee it up with what you're going to be looking at on the left side is a non-FR orange Hi-Vis jacket. And on the right, you're going to be looking at a FR AR Hi-Vis jacket. They're both going to be exposed to an arc flash, and then you'll see some of the results that come from the video. So as you can see there, this is a great visual just to show kind of the importance of making sure that you are selecting FR Hi-Vis jackets. So on the left side, you see that jacket, it burns rapidly, there's melt and drip. All of this can cause a secondary injury. And then you look at the right, at a proper FR/AR jacket, it self-extinguishes and retains all its structure as well. So really the difference between these two jackets could be the difference between a minor injury and a life-altering trauma. So remember also, OSHA requires that clothing must not contribute to injury, which means every layer must be FR compliant from outerwear to accessories. All right, next consideration. I think everybody can resonate with this. comfort and mobility in your FR apparel. So everybody, whether you're a lineman or you're working in an office, the stuff that you wear to work, you want to be comfortable. So workers are more likely to wear FR apparel consistently if it's going to be comfortable. Compliance and protection really depend on this. So when you're considering FR apparel, make sure you're looking for moisture wicking and breathable fabrics to prevent heat stress. Look for garments with stretch panels and ergonomic designs. All of these features improve range of motion. These are critical for tasks like climbing, kneeling, or even overhead work. Also consider seasonal needs. Looking at breathable knits in the summer, insulated but flexible gear in the winter are all things that you should consider when looking for your FR apparel. All right, and next consideration is workplace specific features that you should look for in your FR gear. A lot of this connects really to the previous slide of comfort and mobility, but FR apparel must align with the demands of the job. Task-specific features make a huge difference in the real world, wearability and safety. Think about a garment that doesn't have strategically placed pockets, to help reduce clutter and put your tools in. If you don't have those, you're not going to be as productive, and workers and employees are not going to likely wear them. When FR clothing is built around actual job tasks, workers can move freely, stay productive, and remain protected without needing to adjust or remove their gear. All right, final consideration for a safety manner, and this is a big one: maintenance and cost. So when we're talking about costs, we're not just talking about upfront cost. I really encourage safety managers to look at the full life cycle of a garment and how long it lasts. Can it maintain in FR properties after dozens of washes? Is it easy to inspect for wear or damage? When you factor in replacement cycles and the risk of non-compliance, total cost of ownership becomes a much smarter way to compare your options. And while you're considering cost, you also have to consider maintenance. So if you're going to properly maintain your FR apparel, it is likely going to last longer and protect people for longer. So this is one thing I really want to emphasize, because it may seem like a small thing, but it's very important. First, really just make sure you're reading the manufacturer care instructions on the garments. This is first and foremost. Always just follow those care instructions that are provided by the manufacturers. These are specific to the fabric blend and construction. And if you're going to ignore those, then you could potentially degrade the FR performance over time. The next step is just make sure you're doing regular inspections. Before every use, workers should inspect their FR garments for damage or wear, things like tears, thinning fabric, or missing closures. Any compromised areas can reduce protection significantly in any sort of thermal event. And then proper washing. When it comes to cleaning FR gear, you really want to make sure you're using a mild, non-perfumed detergents. Avoid any fabric softeners, bleach, hydroperoxide-based products. All of these can affect the flame resistance. Wash FR garments separately to prevent cross-contamination from flammable household clothing as well. And then whenever it's possible, work with an industrial laundry provider familiar with FR garment requirements, or at least ensure your in-house programs follow the manufacturer guidelines. And then next is storage. So you want to make sure you're storing your FR clothing in a clean, dry area away from direct sunlight, harsh chemicals, or contamination from fuels and oil. Improper storage can break down protective properties even when garments aren't in use. And then finally, know when to repair or replace. If a garment is damaged, whether from an arc flash, flash fire, or just physical wear, it should be promptly replaced. While small tears or abrasions may seem repairable with FR compliant materials, keep in mind once a garment has been compromised, it may no longer meet required safety standards. So now that we have covered the key considerations, let's discuss understanding dual compliance protection. So let's start with why this matters. Why does dual compliance matter? Well, workers in electrical utilities, oil and gas, roadside construction, and other similar industries face both visibility and thermal hazards. Choosing the wrong gear could lead to non-compliance or even worse, serious injury in the event of an arc flash or flash fire. Utilizing dual compliance FR apparel will also reduce layering, which is going to improve the comfort and increases the likelihood workers will wear the FR apparel properly. So as you can see here, a lot of these things are connecting to some of those key considerations that I mentioned earlier for safety managers. And then also, when you're looking at a dual compliant FR garment, understand also that it meets OSHA requirements. It meets company safety policies, and it meets all of the industry standards to keep your employees safe. Now that you're kind of understanding the why to the dual compliance, let's talk about selecting FR Hi-Vis apparel that is dual compliant. And I want to start with talking about, classification. So ANSI 107 defines type R garments for roadside work, and class 2 or class 3 reflects the amount of high visibility material and design features. But there's a critical part. High-vis gear for high-risk environments must also meet FR standards. So as I mentioned earlier, NFPA 70E for arc flash protection, NFPA 2112 for flash fire protection. You can't simply just add a vest over FR gear. It really defeats the purpose. So look for garments that are dual certified and designed for the hazards of your specific job site. Now, other thing I want to talk about is also really digging into something that tends to get overlooked, and that's reflective tape. Now, all reflective tape material are not created equally. Standard reflective tape can melt or ignite during thermal events. Only really choose garments with FR-rated reflective tape. And remember, dual certified garments must maintain both visibility and flame resistance throughout their service life. So when you're deciding on FR apparel, make sure to check the labels, ask questions, and really work with a trusted supplier so that you can ensure that you have the correct FR Hi-Vis apparel for all of your users. Now, also, one thing to look at too is the different industries and how you approach garment selection. So, for example, electrical utilities, you want to choose an arc-rated gear with class 2 or class 3 visibility, especially if you're for linemen or substation workers. If you're in oil and gas, you want to prioritize flash fire rated garments with reflective elements for visibility when they're around rigs and refineries. And then roadside and construction, select type R, class 2 or 3 garments that are also FR, ensuring workers will remain visible and protected near traffic and heavy equipment. As you can see here from the chart, the ANSI 107 and the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices has the classes from class 1 through class 3. They're all based on the level of risk and required visibility. And remember, for high-risk environments like roadways with complex backgrounds or poor lighting, Class 3 garments are essential. When you're selecting a dual compliant gear, make sure the FR material also maintains Hi-Vis performance for the entire service life. And then now we'll look at a little bit more detail into type R, which is workers that are close or near proximity to the roadways. So workers near roadways face multiple risks, not just the traffic itself, but from divided attention and unpredictable surroundings. For these workers, type R high visibility garments are required. And when thermal hazards are also present, those garments must be FR as well. You're not just relying on a shirt or a vest. You're really investing in a system that makes your people safer, fast changing, and in high risk environments. And now we'll look at enhanced visibility for off-road applications. So as we just discussed about workers that are tending to be near roadways in proximity, there's also the need for jobs that don't happen to be on public roadways. In off-road environments like oil fields, mines, and refineries, a type O garments may be appropriate. These environments usually involve less traffic, slower equipment, and less visual complexity. But here's really the key takeaway. Even off-road, if there's a thermal hazard, you still need FR protection. Your hazard assessment should guide whether visibility or flame resistant is the greater concern, and the gear should then reflect that balance. Now let's look at kind of a real world example. So let's take an industrial electrician. These workers often operate in a confined or dark environments. They perform high-risk tasks, and they even take part in emergency response. Industrial electricians, they need arc-rated protection per NFPA 70E, but they also need to be seen by coworkers, by responders, by anyone else on the site. So their protective gear must deliver both fronts, visibility and thermal safety without compromise. And again, this leads all back to the hazard assessment that we talked about earlier in the presentation.
Yeah, Mike, this is one thing with our Inespro Arc Flash gear that as we were developing the line, we really started to see workers asking for this and safety managers asking for this. In these environments, historically, you would have just a navy garment. But we're really starting to see more of a push to increase that worker visibility because their attention is diverted, because it's a complex, hazardous environment. You want them focused on the job and you want people around them to be able to see them and steer clear of what they're doing, especially in an arc flash zone. So, yeah, this is a really great application where even if you don't necessarily need to meet the requirements of ANSI 107, enhanced visibility could definitely be a good idea.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. That's a great addition to what I've provided earlier. And it's really just for me also, just really seeing a real world example really helps me understand. And I hope it helps everyone else kind of understand the importance of the safety garment that you're selecting and all the processes you need to go through and the key considerations as well when you're selecting your FR apparel. So now we want to do a quick shift of gears here and talk about some of the latest trends and innovations shaping the FR Hi-Vis market. And I will kick it back to Melissa to get us started here.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think the increased interest in enhanced visibility and worker visibility, even for those off-road applications, really is a key trend in and of itself. Another thing that we see is the focus on heat stress and comfortable protection and mitigating heat stress. We've talked a lot about roadside workers, utility workers. These are people that can't take a day off when it's 90 degrees. They have to be able to work in those environments. So, how can we help them to be able to work with a less impact of heat resistance? So, studies do show that productivity does drop as temperatures rise. So, how can we as safety professionals help to mitigate that impact on workers? Now, according to a 2018 European study, they took all of this data, combining over 100 studies that were published between 1950 and 2018, and they studied all of these effects that heat related illness has on worker productivity and their overall health. So, based on this, those researchers found that for every 2 degrees above 75 degrees, productivity drops 2%. Now, 75 degrees isn't really all that hot. So, it's extremely important to continue to be mindful of this as our global temperatures rise. One of the main concerns outside of just an overall health risk is that this can be very costly for companies if they don't put in the time and the mitigation tactics to help alleviate these issues. So, the average heat exhaustion incident costs the company almost $80,000. This is related to medical bills, days away from work, and lost productivity. So, not only is this a health issue, a safety issue, but it's also a financial issue. So, investing in some high quality mitigation tactics and comfortable PPE that helps to reduce that impact of heat stress can really end up, saving a company in the long run. So, what are some of those characteristics that we should look for in PPE to help workers stay more comfortable? So, according to the workers that we've talked to in the electrical and oil and gas industry, the key characteristics that they're looking for when it comes to PPE that they're describing as comfortable are going to be moisture wicking, lightweight, and breathable. Now, comfort is very subjective, but these are kind of the key terms that we constantly hear people asking about actually in the field. And moisture wicking is kind of a new one. This has popped up. More and more people see this in their own life when they're looking at their workout gear or their performance gear as they're going to the gym. They see this term moisture wicking and they recognize, hey, this helps keep me cool and this helps keep me comfortable. So this is now something they're continuing to ask for in a safety garment. So new advancements in FR technology have allowed for these comfort performance indicators to come to life in protective materials. So you can now have lightweight, breathable, moisture wicking materials that don't sacrifice protection. And there's plenty of technologies that are available in the market. I'll kick it back over to Mike to talk about some of the ways that you can incorporate these technologies into your Hi-Vis FR gear.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of expand on what Melissa kind of already touched on, and really looking at exploring kind of those two areas from fabric and reflective trim that have really been finding innovation and certain trends. As Melissa mentioned, a lot of the garments that are engineered in the FR Hi-Vis is now moisture wicking, quick drying fabrics. Melissa also mentioned lightweight and breathable materials, but they're also still remaining or maintaining that Cat 2 arc protection and also dual certification, which we talked about earlier with NFPA 70E, NFPA 2112, and then ANSI 107. We're even seeing a lot of garments that build in the integrated stretch, for enhanced mobility. This would be, ideal for linemen, substation crews, and workers just in confined spaces. And many have the UPF 50 plus rating as well. This is for, long-term sun protection, just making the FR garments a smarter choice for people who are going to be in all-day outdoor wear. The other thing we're looking at too is, or seeing in the market, is reflective trim. So it's no longer just, a compliance checkbox. It's also a critical safety feature as well. So FR-rated reflective trim is designed to maintain its integrity during arc flash or flash fire events, unlike the standard reflective tape, which can melt or ignite under extreme heat. Modern trims also are more durable. They're laundry resistant and strategically placed on the apparel to offer the 360-degree visibility in those low light, poor weather, and night work situations. You'll also see on the image here, the product of our Hi-Vis performance hoodie is the segmented and stretchable options that move with the garment. The trim is improving the comfort without, really sacrificing any of the visibility or protection. The takeaway is pretty simple here. Today's FR Hi-Vis apparel isn't just compliant, it's now smart, durable, and comfortable. Like Melissa said, a lot of those features and benefits that came from athleisure wear or athletic wear are now in the FR market as well. And from there, I will send it back to Melissa to talk about some more advanced visibility.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So we talked a little bit about applications for, say, an industrial electrician who don't need to meet ANSI 107 requirements, but may want some increased visibility on the job site. So we talked about that enhanced visibility. This is a new arc flash suit that we have, and it really employs some of those things that we talked about. You have your fluorescence on the biceps there. That helps to, number one, mark that person as a person, helps to use that biomotion that we talked about. The fluorescence is going to provide contrast to that navy surrounding the garment, and then also the person's surroundings. And then you have that reflectivity in there in combination with the fluorescence. So that's going to provide some visibility in a low light setting. The new innovation here comes with the photoluminescence. So we talked about fluorescent and reflectivity materials. Those still require some source of light in order to improve the visibility of that worker. We're talking about now the new technology of photoluminescence, which only needs a small amount of light to charge, and that can glow in the dark with no additional light source for up to 8 hours. So this is intended to work on cloudy days, rainy days, low light conditions. And you can see this photo here. It's actually this accent glowing, and we charged it in just a regular standard light bulb for a few minutes. So it's very easy to use and meant to just really take visibility to the next level. So why is this important for electrical workers? Well, electrical workers are oftentimes working in a power outage situation. So not only are they able to be seen in low light, ambient light, good light, but they can also be seen when the lights go out. So if you are working in a power outage situation to restore power, this is going to allow you to be seen in that potentially dark industrial environment, on that roadway, as you're restoring that power. So this is a real neat innovation that is just coming onto the market. So it really just goes to show you that safety technology is constantly evolving, and really new and exciting things are making their way onto the safety space that just really take worker safety to the next level, and allow us to keep innovating in terms of worker safety, comfort, and just overall helping those workers to get home safely to their families at the end of the day. So I think that about wraps up, but we're going to turn it back over to Barry for some questions. But we just want to thank you all for joining us today and learning more about worker visibility, some new innovations, and all the things that are on the top of our mind to help workers in those high risk environments become safer. So if you'd love to learn about any of the technologies or products we talked about today, please reach out to our customer service department or visit our website, www.thinknsa.com. You'll see all of the innovations and all the products that we have to offer. But let's turn it over to Barry and answer some questions that you all have submitted.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights with us today. Before we start the Q&A, I want to let everyone know about the evaluation survey that we're asking you to complete. The survey will open in a different screen after this webinar, and your input is really important to us because it does help us to improve our future webcasts. Now let's get to some of those questions. And Mike, I'm going to start with you. The first question is, are there any key labels or certifications that we should check for when buying FR Hi-Vis gear?
Yeah, absolutely, Barry. Thank you. You definitely want to look at when you're buying FR Hi-Vis gear, as we kind of mentioned and hit on multiple points throughout the presentation, is you really want to, one, start with that hazard assessment so you're understanding what certifications you're going to be looking for. So if you need flash fire protection, it's going to be NFPA 2112 and NFPA 70E for arc flash hazards. Also remember, for the visibility, it's checking for ANSI 107 compliance. It's typically, a type R, class 2 or 3 for high risk environments. And then remember too, when you're considering the compliance on your garments, remember what we talked about with the FR rated reflective tape as well. Must make sure that that is part of the garment, and make sure that you're checking the entire garment when you're looking for those certain certifications and key labels.
Excellent. Melissa, I'm going to send the next question your way. One of our audience members wants to know, how important is it to wash and care for this gear the right way? And can that really affect performance?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Mike covered that, the number one thing is to make sure that you're looking at that label. So not only for the certifications, the safety requirements that that garment meets, but you want to check for those care instructions. When you're talking about FR gear, it really does matter when it comes to how you care for it. You want to maintain that protected nature. You also want to make sure that, you're caring for that reflective trim so that it's staying reflective the way it needs to be to keep you visible. So most high-vis garments, if they're manufactured properly, they should have in the label the number of washings that that reflective material is good for. So it's important to take that into consideration. When you're talking about FR, you always want to wash it separately, and make sure that you're not using any sort of detergents that have flammable components like a fabric softener. You don't want to use bleach, all of those kind of things. So always look at the label. If you're not sure, reach out to the manufacturer and they should be able to help you determine, what the best path forward is for taking care of that garment to ensure compliance from visibility and also from an FR perspective.
Great advice. Thank you for that, Melissa. Mike, I'm going to send the next question your way. What kind of feedback do you hear from workers who wear the gear every day, and how does that impact product design?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, we hear, consistently from workers that when they're looking for FR garments, they're really focused on the comfort and the mobility. It's not just important to have the protection. They really want to feel comfortable, that they have range of motion, which when we're designing products, we're prioritizing, lighter fabrics, the stretch paneling, moisture wicking, and really focused on better fit. I would say, another trend that's also happening when it comes to FR garments and design is a lot a lot of workers are now incorporating and want style in their garments. So they want to wear their FR stuff outside when they're doing chores or when they're going to run an errand. It has been a trend we've been seeing over the past couple of years, and it will continue to be something that end users and employees will be looking for in their FR gear.
Excellent. Melissa, a question for you. One of our attendees wants to know, do you have high-vis gear for women?
Absolutely. Yeah. We do have high visibility garments that are specifically designed for women. It is important as OSHA continues to emphasize that fit is extremely important for all workers. We've seen in the past that women wearing men's garments, sometimes that garment can actually pose a risk to you because it's oversized. Maybe you can't move, mobility is so important. So you want to be able to move and function without any sort of potential hazard coming from your garment. It's meant to protect you. So the one thing that really helped us to be able to achieve this in a much better way with a better fitting garment for women is when ANSI 107 made the change to allow for smaller sizes. So this update went through in 2015, and they actually added this requirement that allows that the smallest size that a manufacturer is making can have a slightly reduced amount of material and just for that small size. And that really allowed us to be able to adjust and allow designs to fit a woman's body that can still allow them to be visible. So this has been actually really a key innovation, I would say, just to allow women to have something specifically designed for them to keep them safe and comfortable on the job. So all sizes and all shapes can be accommodated, and that's really important to OSHA right now. So, great question.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for one more question today before we reach the top of the hour. And I want to ask you both about your feedback on this, Mike and Melissa. Our questioner asks, why does it matter to have both high-vis and FR protection in one garment? And can't we just layer regular high-vis over our FR?
I can go ahead and kind of kick that off. Barry, so that is a common question. It's a critical one. As we kind of discussed, you can't just layer, a regular high-vis vest over FR clothing because, most standard high-vis gear isn't flame resistant. And as we discussed before, if it's not going to be flame resistant and there's an event of an arc flash or flash fire, that outer layer can ignite, it's melt and drip. It's basically turning your protective base layer into a serious hazard. So that's why it's important to make sure that that outer layer as well has the FR protection as well. Melissa, do you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to just checking the label, making sure what you have meets the requirements, that it is arc rated or flash fire rated. You want to make sure, even if you have on your regular FR coverall or arc rated daily wear, you're not adding fuel onto that protection. So nothing can be contributory to injury. So this is a big thing, just making sure that yes, you have your primary protection, but nothing that you're adding to that is going to negatively impact your garment's ability to do its job. So it doesn't have to meet the exact requirements. Say you have a 12 cal arc rating requirement. If you have your 12 cal work shirt on and you put a high-vis vest over that, it doesn't need to meet 12 cal as long as your primary protection does. That's another question that we get, but non-contributory, that is the key.
Excellent. Thank you both. Folks, unfortunately, we've run out of time today. We thank you all for attending, and we would appreciate you taking just a minute or two to share your feedback via our survey. A big thank you goes out today to our awesome presenters, Mike Clifford and Melissa Dixon, and of course, everyone from our sponsor at Dryfire. This ends today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. Take care, everyone, and have a safe day.